Welcome to the English learning community. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode. Today we're diving into something truly special, a story that's not just going to improve your listening and writing skills, but also inspire you to take your English to the next level. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's get started. Have you ever been in a situation where someone was speaking and you just couldn't catch everything they said? Or maybe you were trying to write something, an email, a message, or even a story, but the words just wouldn't come to you. Trust me, we've all been there. But here's the good news. Today's episode is designed to help you overcome those challenges. We're going to explore real-life stories and examples that show you exactly how English is used in everyday conversations. These stories are packed with practical vocabulary, natural sentence structures, and tips that will boost your confidence and fluency. By the end of this episode, you'll not only understand English better, but also feel more comfortable using it in your own life. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a few questions. These are meant to get you thinking and set the stage for what's coming next. So, as you listen to today's episode, keep these questions in mind. 1. Have you ever felt nervous about speaking English because you were afraid of making mistakes? 2. What's one situation where you struggled to understand someone speaking English? 3. When you write in English, do you sometimes feel like you're missing the right words? These questions are more than just food for thought. They're the foundation of what we're about to explore. The story you're going to hear today is all about overcoming fear, embracing mistakes, and finding the courage to keep going. It's about real people, real challenges, and real growth. And trust me, by the end of it, you'll feel inspired to take on your own English learning journey with a fresh perspective. So, are you ready? Let's jump into today's story and discover how mistakes can actually be magic in disguise. Let's go. Speak first, perfect later. The fast track to fluency. The challenge begins. In a bustling city in Australia, there lived a young woman named Emma. Emma had always been fascinated by languages, especially English. She'd learned it in school, but she still found herself struggling with speaking confidently. Whenever she had to speak in English, whether at work or with friends, she felt nervous and self-conscious. She was terrified of making mistakes. Every time she said something wrong, she would replay the mistake over and over in her head, convinced that everyone was laughing at her. One evening, as Emma was walking home from a coffee shop, she bumped into an elderly man sitting on a bench near the park. His white hair and wrinkled face gave him an air of wisdom. Emma had seen him around the neighborhood before, but today he seemed to be waiting for her. "Good evening," he greeted her in a calm, welcoming voice. Emma hesitated before replying, her usual nerves rising. "Good evening," she said quietly, trying to sound confident. The old man smiled and motioned for her to sit beside him. "What's on your mind, young one?" "You look troubled." Emma hesitated. She didn't know this man, but something about his kindness made her feel comfortable enough to share her worries. I want to speak English better," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But every time I try, I make mistakes, and I'm afraid people will laugh at me." The old man nodded, understanding her fear. "Ah, I see," he said thoughtfully. "Let me tell you a story, something that might help you." The story of the first step. The old man leaned back and began his story. Many years ago, in a small village far from here, there was a young girl named Maya. Maya lived in a village where everyone spoke their native language. But Maya had big dreams. She wanted to speak English just like the people she saw on TV, just like the tourists who came to visit her village. She wanted to speak confidently, to connect with people from all over the world. Emma listened intently, curious about where the story would go. Maya wasn't like other kids in her village. She was shy and often felt out of place. She didn't have many opportunities to practice English, and she was afraid of making mistakes too. Every time she tried to speak, she would mix up her words or forget what she wanted to say. But Maya didn't give up. She kept trying, speaking whenever she could, even when her sentences weren't perfect. The old man paused and looked at Emma. One day, Maya met a traveler who was lost. He asked her for directions in English, and for the first time, Maya didn't hesitate. She spoke to him, not caring if her words were perfect. She just wanted to help him. And you know what? He understood her perfectly, and he thanked her with a big smile. Emma was surprised. But if her English wasn't perfect, how could he understand her? Ah, the old man smiled, because communication isn't just about perfect grammar. It's about connection. Maya learned that when she stopped worrying about making mistakes, she was able to express herself more freely. The more she spoke, the better she got. Not because she waited for perfection, but because she kept trying. Part 3. The lesson. The old man looked at Emma, his eyes kind. You see, Emma, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to speak. Speak first, and perfection will come later. It's the only way to grow. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. She realized that she had been so focused on being perfect that she hadn't been letting herself learn. She had been holding back, afraid of the mistakes that were an inevitable part of the learning process. I guess I've been too scared to try, Emma admitted softly, but I really want to speak English well. I want to connect with people, to feel confident. The old man nodded. Then start now. Speak, make mistakes, and learn from them. Every mistake is a lesson, and every lesson brings you closer to fluency. Emma smiled, feeling the weight of her worries lift. She thanked the old man and walked home, thinking about his words. That night, she made a promise to herself. She would speak more, no matter how many mistakes she made. The journey continues. The next day, Emma woke up with a new resolve. She decided to take small steps. She began speaking English with her co-workers, even if it was just for a few minutes each day. She made mistakes, yes, but she didn't let them stop her. She laughed at herself and kept going. Soon, Emma noticed something surprising. The more she spoke, the easier it became. People weren't laughing at her mistakes. In fact, they appreciated her effort. Her co-workers encouraged her, telling her how proud they were of her progress. And one day, Emma found herself speaking to a tourist at a cafe. This time, she didn't feel afraid. She didn't care if her English was perfect. What mattered was that she was connecting, sharing, and learning. As the months went by, Emma's confidence grew. She kept speaking, kept practicing, and little by little, her English became stronger. And with every conversation, every new word, Emma learned a valuable lesson. Speak first, perfect later. The setbacks. As Emma's confidence grew, she found herself in situations where her newly acquired English skills were tested in unexpected ways. One afternoon, she attended a meeting at work. The team was discussing an important project that involved international clients, and Emma's boss, Sarah, asked if anyone could help with a presentation in English. Emma's heart raced. She had been speaking English more fluently in casual conversations, but this was different. This was a formal situation, with important people watching her. She hesitated. "I think I can do it," she said quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. Sarah smiled. "Great. We'll work on it together. Let's set up a practice session tomorrow." The day of the presentation arrived, and Emma stood in front of her colleagues, feeling nervous. As she started to speak, she stumbled over a word. She could feel her face turning red. The more she tried to correct herself, the more she felt like she was failing. Her mind went blank, and for a moment, she thought about quitting. But then, she remembered the old man's words, "Speak first, perfect later." She took a deep breath, smiled at the audience, and continued, even though her sentences weren't perfect. She made mistakes, yes, but she didn't let them stop her. The room was quiet, listening, and by the end of the presentation, despite her stumbles, Emma had gotten the message across clearly. Afterward, Sarah approached her with a smile. "That was really good, Emma," she said. "You did a great job. Don't worry about the mistakes. You're learning, and that's what matters." Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't about perfection. It was about trying, about connecting, about putting herself out there. The real test. A few weeks later, Emma had an opportunity that she had been dreaming about for a long time. A travel company had contacted her for an internship. It was a job that required her to communicate in English daily, and the thought of it both excited and terrified her. The interview was scheduled for the following week, and Emma spent every free moment practicing. She reviewed possible questions, wrote down her answers, and rehearsed in front of the mirror. But no matter how much she prepared, she still felt anxious about the idea of speaking in English in a formal interview. On the day of the interview, Emma walked into the company's office, her heart pounding. The interviewer, a middle-aged woman named Carla, greeted her with a friendly smile and led her to a conference room. "So, Emma," Carla began, "I see that you've been working with English for a while. Tell me about your experiences and how you've improved your skills." Emma froze for a second. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. She had to speak, and she had to speak confidently. I've been trying to speak more, even though I make mistakes," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "I think the best way to learn is to speak first and fix the mistakes later. I've been focusing on making connections with people, not just perfecting my language." Carla smiled warmly. "I like that attitude. Mistakes are part of learning. Can you tell me about a time when you made a mistake while using English and how you handled it?" Emma paused, thinking. "There was a time at work when I gave a presentation in English, and I made a few mistakes in the middle of it. I felt nervous, but I kept going. I realized that the people I was speaking to were more interested in what I had to say than in whether I got every word right." Carla nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great mindset to have. It shows resilience and a willingness to improve. You'll fit in well here." By the end of the interview, Emma felt a sense of pride. She hadn't spoken perfectly, but she had spoken from the heart. She had stayed true to her belief. Speak first, perfect later. The breakthrough. A few days later, Emma received an email from the travel company. She had gotten the internship. As she read the email, a wave of excitement and relief washed over her. She had made it, not because her English was flawless, but because she had taken the chance to speak up and be herself. Her fear of mistakes no longer held her back. The first day at the internship was a whirlwind. Emma was thrown into meetings, phone calls, and emails. Everything was in English. She stumbled a few times, but instead of retreating, she kept going. With each mistake, she learned something new. She asked questions, clarified things when she didn't understand, and took notes to improve her vocabulary. Every conversation was an opportunity to learn. One afternoon, while chatting with a colleague, Emma had a small breakthrough. She had just finished explaining a project update when her colleague said, "Wow, Emma, your English has really improved. I remember when you were hesitant to speak up. You're doing so well now." Emma smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had come so far. She remembered her old self, the one who was too afraid to speak, and couldn't believe how much she had changed. It wasn't just about speaking better English, it was about building confidence, trusting herself, and learning from her mistakes. Full circle months passed, and Emma's journey continued. She became more fluent, more confident, and more comfortable using English in all aspects of her life. She wasn't afraid of mistakes anymore. In fact, she started to embrace them, knowing that each mistake was a stepping stone to improvement. One day, while walking through the park again, she spotted the old man sitting on the same bench where they had first spoken. She approached him with a smile. "Hello, sir," she said. The old man looked up, his eyes twinkling. "Well, if it isn't the young woman who learned to speak first and perfect later," Emma laughed. "I've learned a lot, thanks to your advice." The old man nodded. "You've learned something even more valuable. You've learned that fluency isn't just about speaking perfectly, it's about speaking with confidence, making connections, and never giving up." Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the man's wisdom, and as she walked away, she realized how far she had come. She wasn't just speaking English anymore, she was living it, breathing it, and sharing it with the world. Conclusion: Emma's story teaches us all that the path to fluency in any language isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about embracing them. By speaking first and worrying about perfection later, we allow ourselves to grow. The more we speak, the more we connect with others, and the more we learn. Fluency comes not from avoiding mistakes, but from the courage to speak despite them, to keep trying, and to never give up. The fear of speaking. Emma sat at her desk in her tiny office in Melbourne, looking at her screen with a furrowed brow. She had an email open from her boss, asking her to help out with a presentation in English for a big client meeting. Why me? Emma thought, staring at the screen like it might spontaneously fix itself. English was her second language, and she was definitely not ready for this level of exposure. Okay, it's just a presentation. I've been speaking English for years, right? She muttered to herself, but the panic was already creeping up. Every time she thought about speaking English in front of others, her brain went into shutdown mode, and all she could think was, what if I mess up? Her co-worker, Sarah, walked in, just as Emma was staring at her keyboard like it held the secret to the universe. "Hey Emma, are you okay? You look like you're trying to invent a new language." Emma looked up with wide eyes. "It's this presentation. I need to speak in English, and I'm so nervous. What if I mess up? What if I sound like a complete fool?" Sarah, ever the optimist, sat down with a grin. "You mean, what if you sound human? Because trust me, no one expects you to sound like a robot with perfect English. Just speak like you would with me. You're good at that, right?" Emma sighed. "I mean, yeah, I talk to you every day, but it's different. What if they laugh? What if they don't understand me?" Sarah laughed. "Listen, Emma, the last time I heard someone laugh at a mistake in English was in high school, and that was because someone said, 'I have a headache in my knee.' So, unless you're talking about body parts in the wrong places, You'll be fine. Emma managed a nervous chuckle. Yeah, but it's a big presentation. I'll sound like a messed up GPS. All right, GPS, calm down. If you need to make a mistake, do it with style. That's what makes you memorable. Sarah patted her on the shoulder. The nervous presentation. The day of the presentation arrived. Emma stood in front of her colleagues, her hands shaking like they had a mind of their own. She had practiced in front of her mirror until she was sure her reflection was giving her a look of concern. Okay, deep breaths, Emma. You've got this. Speak slow, be confident, and remember, nobody cares if you don't say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious correctly. She took a deep breath and clicked the presentation button. As she started talking, her tongue felt like it was doing its own dance, tripping over words like a clumsy toddler. She caught herself stumbling over a sentence, and her face turned as red as a tomato. Great. Fantastic. I'm embarrassing myself. We are working on the project. It's very important because it's big. There was an awkward silence. She froze. Her brain screamed, "Just finish it already, Emma." But then something unexpected happened. Her boss, Sarah, who was sitting at the back of the room, waved her hand enthusiastically. "Hey, Emma, you're doing great. It's just like when you tried to explain your new vegan recipe to me last week. Keep going." The room burst into laughter, but not in the mocking way Emma had feared. It was warm laughter. People weren't laughing at her. They were laughing with her, as if they understood that she was doing her best. Emma took a breath. Right. Anyway, so the project is very important, and we will deliver it with full confidence, even if my words are not always perfect. And with that, Emma smiled and finished the presentation, realizing that her mistakes weren't the end of the world. In fact, they made her more real to her colleagues. They appreciated her effort, not her perfection. The wise stranger. After that presentation, Emma felt a little more confident. But there were still moments when her nerves would kick in, especially when she was talking to someone new. One afternoon, she was grabbing a coffee at her local cafe when she noticed a man sitting outside. He looked like he had stories to tell, wrinkled face, messy white beard, and a glint in his eye that said, "I know something you don't." He waved at her as she passed by. "Hey there, young one. You look like someone who could use some advice." Emma stopped, a bit taken aback. What do you mean?" He smiled. "Come sit with me for a while, and I'll tell you something that might help." Emma hesitated for a second, then shrugged. Why not? She had a few minutes to spare. She sat down across from him, her coffee cup in hand. "I'm Theo, by the way," the man said, extending his hand. "Emma, nice to meet you." "So, what's got you all twisted up inside?" Theo asked. Emma sighed. "I'm learning English, and I just feel like, like I'm always making mistakes, and every time I try to speak, I just freeze up." Theo chuckled. The fear of making mistakes. That's a tough one. But let me tell you something. Mistakes are like those weird little bumps you hit while driving. They're annoying at first, but they show you're moving forward. You don't see people driving in circles because they're scared of bumps, do you? Emma laughed. "No, that's true. But I want to be perfect, you know." Theo leaned back in his chair and scratched his beard. "Let me tell you a story. There was once a little bird who wanted to fly, but every time it tried, it would fall to the ground, wings flapping wildly. It thought it wasn't good enough to fly and kept saying, 'I'm not ready.' But you know what? That little bird never got better at flying until it stopped worrying about falling. The moment it stopped worrying about falling was the moment it soared. Emma nodded, intrigued. So, you're saying I need to stop worrying about making mistakes and just do it? Exactly. You have to speak first, make those silly mistakes, and then learn from them. You'll fly one day, but not if you're stuck on the ground thinking about what could go wrong. The breakthrough moment. Feeling a little lighter, Emma decided to take Theo's advice seriously. The next day at work, she had another meeting with some international clients. Normally, she would have dreaded speaking in English, but today, she felt different. She didn't care if she made mistakes. She was going to speak first. And so, when the moment came, Emma stood up, cleared her throat, and began the meeting. She wasn't perfect. She fumbled over a few words, mixed up some tenses, and even said furniture when she meant future. But it didn't matter. The clients smiled, nodded, and even laughed at the occasional mistake. They were more interested in hearing what she had to say than focusing on her imperfections. "Emma, you did great," Sarah said afterward. "You've really come a long way. I saw you make mistakes, but you didn't let it stop you. That's the best way to learn." Emma grinned. She had finally learned the truth. Perfection was overrated. What mattered was that she was trying, making connections, and growing. Conclusion: the power of speaking first. From that day on, Emma no longer feared making mistakes. In fact, she started to embrace them. Every mistake was a step forward in her journey to fluency. And every conversation, whether it was with a co-worker, a client, or a random stranger in the cafe, became an opportunity to practice, to learn, and to grow. She even found herself joking about her mistakes. One time, while explaining a project to a client, she said, "We'll have everything ready by next month, unless, of course, my English gets in the way." The client laughed, and so did she. It felt good to not take herself so seriously. And as for Theo, she never saw him again, but she often thought about his words, "Speak first, perfect later," and she was living proof that it worked. Moral of the story: mistakes are part of the journey to fluency. The best way to learn a language is to speak it, even if it's not perfect. By embracing mistakes, you'll connect more with others, learn faster, and eventually get where you want to go. If you enjoyed today's story and found it helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We've got so many more inspiring stories, practical tips, and fun lessons coming your way to help you master English and boost your confidence. And hey, if you're feeling extra motivated, leave a comment below and tell us, what's one mistake you've made while learning English, and what did you learn from it? We'd love to hear your stories and cheer you on. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, every step you take is progress, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.